Now for the final part, I want to go over inputs. So what if you actually want to input data into Python? There's a number of ways of doing it. We'll cover several more practical ways perhaps in terms of loading files in the future or coming weeks. Let's do a simple input though, where you can do it sort of dynamically as you're doing or executing some code. So here we're going to do define x, which will take integer, which will, this time we're defining x as integer, so you can do that in Python. You can specify something's going to be integer, but we're going to allow an input value to be put in. So it'll allow you to hopefully enter a value. This we'll call it an integer. So we'll say enter an integer. Okay. So it should say x. So when you run this code, you should be able to input a value into x. So it should be able to be defined. So let's say once you define it, then we can check to see what kind of value is it. Is it less than 0, for instance? Then it will say print negative changed to 0 or something like this, or negative changed to 0, perhaps. Let's spell the words properly. So again, we have to do quotations to make it print that statement in letters. Okay, you don't want to indent because we're outside the if. But what if we do an else if? So conditional statements can take if else kind of statements. So you could also put multiple else kinds of statements in what are called else if statements. So else if are basically the second, third, fourth. The last conditional will be the else. So the else if is our second conditional. If it equals 0 in this case, we'll say print 0. Okay. Else if x equals 1. So if it equals 1, then it's print single value, something like that. And then finally, if it's anything else in this case, it'll say print more. Okay. Than 1. Okay, so what this is saying, let's go back, we have actually an error over here, so we actually have to give it some value, so we'll say 0. So let's go over this code real quick. So what we're saying is basically if x is less than 0, it's going to print. Else if x equals 0, so if x equals 0, it'll print 0. If x equals 1, it'll print single value, and otherwise it'll print something else, so more than 1, basically. So this is a series of conditionals using an else if-else structure, if being the first conditional check, second conditional check being the if statement, and the final one, the final conditional is an else. So it's the last one that you use. You typically have only two conditionals, if and else, but if you have more than two, then it's good to use the elif for kind of command, which basically allows you to apply multiple conditions in an if-else sequence of statements. Okay, so let's execute this code and see what actually happens. We run it, we enter the integer, let's say it's 2, so it says more than 1. So what happens basically, it says that you've entered a value more than 1, that is 2, and so it launches our else statement that you see at the very end. Okay, so that's basically what we have for today for our quick lessons. I do want you to do some more lessons. So if you go to the Moodle site, so if I go to the Moodle site, you'll see I've put an additional link to more learning Python sort of practices you can do. Just go ahead and click on that. You'll see this welcome page. And some of the lessons that we covered today are already captured in that. But you can go to different things like functions, loops, etc. Just go ahead and click on those. And go over those lessons and scripts. You'll see you can execute a lot of the code right then and there, which is a nice way to see what you're doing and see how it does it and what results. So please go ahead and practice that for this week or in class, depending on what time, when you're doing things. But that's basically all we have for today. Thank you for your time and hope to see you next week.